Stelio, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Michael. Appreciate it.
We're talking to Stelio Savante. He's a SAG Award nominee and American Movie Award winner. And he's been in a great faith-centric film recently called Pursuit of Freedom. It's the true story of a Ukrainian woman who was separated from her 3 children and sold. And you play a character named Bedros or Bedros. What attracted you to that project, Stelio?
You know, there were several elements. Actually, the way God brought it to me, when you've been doing this as long as I have, things usually come the traditional route, which is reps that you work with. I was halfway across the country. An agent I don't even work with called me up and said, I have an offer for you on something. What's your rate? And I said, I'm sorry, who is this again? And she said, it's this lady, Jean. So it was a little bit serendipitous to me, the way that it had come to me. She told me in about a 30-second pitch what it was about, the role they wanted me for. And it took reading through certain scenes and the script several times to know that God's blessed me with a skill set that I could be worthy of serving the role properly. Bedros is a missionary. He is called by the Lord to be an instrument in helping rescue this woman and her 2 children who have been sold into trafficking. And I felt I could do the story and the character justice, prayed about it, discussed it with my family, and then requested a phone call with the director, which I do before all projects, just to have an understanding of what his vision was, who his cinematographer was, how he planned to tell the story, because the script was so good. But unfortunately, in Christian films for a long time, we've seen a lot of stories kind of be preached rather than just be told. And as I've shared many times before, the same way that I don't go to a movie theater to see a sermon, I don't go to church to watch a film. And I wanted to make sure that the responsibility as a storyteller would have artistic integrity in speaking with the director, George, and then watching a film of his and what he did with Pursuit of Freedom. Those questions were all answered in the positive. It was an honor to be part of Pursuit of Freedom. And a thank you to Lonnie, who is the man that was a missionary in Europe and basically heard these stories over dinner table scenes, where dinner table conversations, where they had talked about some of the missionaries who he ended up actually not realizing he even knew them, but didn't know their story. And it was his story of all these people that was adapted for the screen by George.
You've been in quite a few mainstream projects, quite a few family projects as well. I'm going to list a few: Army Dog, Bernie the Dolphin, and one that people will definitely know about, The Chosen Season 1. You were there from the beginning. You played Moses. I guess that was a flashback scene of sorts in episode.
Yes.
Okay. My goodness, take us back to that first year. It's grown, beyond anything I think you and I thought it would be. But what was that like to make that? And did you even have an inkling that it would be as big as it has gotten?
It was a pretty incredible experience from several different perspectives. Before I get into that, it was my 3rd time working with Dallas Jenkins. I had first done a film with him called What If, I'd say, Michael, in probably around 2008, maybe 2009. We then did a short film called Once We Were Slaves, or The Two Thieves. It was about the crucifixion from the perspective of the 2 thieves. Dallas's gift is showing something from a very nuanced perspective, which helps us relate to the Lord better. And that gift obviously now fully realized with the success of The Chosen, which is really an undertaking of the Great Commission and sharing the gospel with all corners of the world. He had reached out to me for a role in The Chosen. I was going to be playing a totally separate role, but as it would be, it was raining nonstop in Texas, and I was then contracted to fly to Jordan, to the Middle East, to shoot an action thriller with Jim Caviezel called Infidel, about a Christian blogger that's kidnapped. So unfortunately, I left. While we're in Jordan, we go to Mount Nebo, where Moses is buried. You get to the top of it, and you get pretty emotional, at least I did, because you see the topography, the geography of Jordan, which is very rocky, in the horizon leading out over into the Holy Land, where it's actually lush and green and flourishing, and knowing in Moses' footsteps, in Moses' journey, he got to see the promised land, but not go into it. Fast forward to, I was supposed to play a different role, and a year from having come back from Jordan, I find out Dallas is sending me something. He says, this is a very iconic role. You're not allowed to say no, but I'm not telling you what it is. I read it. It's Moses. And when we had been at Mount Nebo, not even knowing I'd be playing Moses later on, we get to the part of Mount Nebo where the serpent and the pole, which is huge, it's on the top of the hill. The sun is hitting it, and I have photos of it. It's hitting it in a way that the serpent, the cross, is making, it almost looks like the wings of an angel, and brought one of my Psalm 36:7, my favorite Bible verse, to mind. And here he is asking me to be part of the chosen. I was thrilled. I'd been friends with Dallas for many years. I've been friends with Jonathan. He's not in the cold opening where I play Moses, but I knew he was playing Jesus. So I was beyond thrilled, and just to see how it's sharing the gospel, and also that it is an incredibly well done project. Akis is a genius DP. I was a cinematographer myself, and I think it was John Gunn that had recommended Akis. I had worked on a different film with Jim Caviezel and Matt Dillon called Running for Grace, which we did in Hawaii. His cinematography was gorgeous. The colors, the tapestry, his understanding of natural light. I couldn't rave about him enough to Dallas. And Dallas, Akis, Tyler, the stories, they're brilliant. They're brilliant.
How did you get to know Dallas? He's been in the faith, film industry for such a long time and has been, highly regarded. How did you get to know Dallas?
I met Dallas at a dinner. Gary Sinise is one of my mentors, probably since about 2008, maybe. And Dallas was one of the people he introduced me to. My career had been almost exclusively mainstream, nothing Christian or anything like that. And Dallas said, you guys should talk Gary said, you guys should talk, because Gary knew I was a follower of Christ, obviously Dallas and his father's history as a writer. So that's how the friendship started, through Gary. Wow.
And of course, Jonathan, you mentioned Jonathan a second ago, Jonathan Rumi is who we're talking about. And of course, he portrays Jesus in The Chosen. So you knew Jonathan Rumi before everybody knew who Jonathan Rumi is. That's kind of neat.
I did. And it was, what was interesting was, we shot it in a quarry in Illinois. It was 26 degrees plus the wind chill factor. And I had lived in New York. So obviously it's a very different type of weather than we're spoiled with here in California. But what was fascinating was that in my process, and every actor has a process, and I won't bore you or anyone else with it, but all of my focus was on the Lord, because for the penitent thief, there's that switching in the heart that happens. So all my focus was on Jonathan playing that character, and you could tell there's a certain way actors, we study other people's behavior for a living. That's what we do. And you knew Jonathan knew. He knew what to do with what he was given in that part. There was a weight and a truth and a responsibility that he gave to the part of Jesus way before anyone knew him. Because of his faith, we became friends. We've been prayer partners. So yeah, we've been friends long before The Chosen happened. Correct.
Are you talking about Two Thieves right now? Or are you talking about The Chosen when you first met Jonathan?
No, I'm talking about the Two Thieves. Sorry for being ambiguous. No, I'm referring to the Two Thieves, which was shot many, many years before The Chosen was. That's where we met.
You've also been you said Infidel, which was a phenomenal film. I saw that as well, and saw it in theater. You've been in ABC's Ugly Betty. Two new ones you've been in are Angry Neighbors and What Remains. What do you enjoy playing more? Do you enjoy playing good guys or bad guys? What has been the story of your career?
I enjoy playing anything that I can connect to truthfully, because I've been blessed to live a pretty extraordinary life in terms of, I was born and raised in South Africa. My parents, their grandparents, immigrants. I go through a very tumultuous childhood. Parents get divorced at a young age. The way I come to know the Lord is that I understand that perhaps my self-loathing and lack of self-worth and self-hatred is not what it seems, but that this man, Jesus Christ, loves me for who I am. I then apply for a tennis scholarship to the US, come to the University of West Alabama in the South. I get baptized again because I've been baptized as a baby. I get baptized as an adult, commit my life to the Lord, who very generously allows me to wander in the desert. I moved to New York City. I'm married to the lady that's now my wife for 30 plus years. We have a child, but I get to film all over the world in some incredible countries, Europe, the Middle East. So I go back to South Africa, I film here. And over the course of, the last 30 something years and working and living in all these countries, there's a common theme, which is understanding people and their struggle. And I grew up watching an era of films that had just come out of French New Wave, Italian neorealism, about subjects that blue-collar struggling people identify with. I'm then an immigrant, so the roles I gravitate to most naturally are blue-collar roles. I do often play villains, and they are juicier, they're more fun to play because they're so far away from things I do in real life. But for me, it is about the arc of redemption. And in speaking with Pastor Mike Finizio very early on in my career, which is Greg Laurie's East Coast Church, it's Harvest Christian Fellowship, New York, somebody had brought up in church, Stelio, why do you always play criminals? You're on Law and Order SVU and Sopranos and all these shows, and you're playing murderers. Like, how does that glorify God? I struggled with it, and I said, you don't know what's happening behind the scenes. I'm meeting people who are coming to know the Lord and see a Bible in my trailer. But I went and spoke to Pastor Mike about it. He said, first of all, it's between you and the Lord. But secondly, the Bible, if not the most R-rated book, is one of. Nothing is sort of covered up or no excuses made for it. It actually behooves us to show characters where there's consequences for their sin. Sin is not glorified. Most of the time that would be with somebody who's villainous, because there's no such thing as a perfect person. Sadly, and this is not me calling them out, but in Christian films early on, we saw there were people that had no flaws. I cannot identify with that. What I can identify with that is finding our way back to God, which he so beautifully allows us to do. So for that reason, I am drawn to those kind of characters. It's not just about there being an arc to have redemption. It's because those kind of people are what audiences identify with. They understand struggle. They understand the way we perceive ourselves versus the way God does.
Yes, and in order to tell stories of redemption, you do need bad characters. You can't have a film. Like you were saying, you need good and bad in a film for it to tell that arc. Is it difficult to be a Christian in this industry? I mean, do you sometimes wonder, where do you go from here?
That's a very interesting question, because over the years, my discernment is something I've had to become way better with. Working, you're told the second you start working, which I've been blessed to do for a very long time, you believe that work begets work. Mm-hmm. And you take a job for certain different reasons. It could be for money. It could be because you want to shoot somewhere that's exciting that you haven't filmed before. You need to get away. You want to take your family somewhere. And as you grow in your faith and you spend time daily with God and you understand, okay, Lord, I'm not really here for my own glorification in the art. I'm not here for awards. I'm not here to become wealthy. I'm here because you allow me to be an instrument for you to reach corners of the world that the traditional church cannot. And I'm not referring to the end product, which is the film when it comes out. I'm referring to those relationships that are made on set when you're shooting in Jordan and you meet Palestinian Christians and you meet missionaries who go to the garbage dumps and save babies' lives because they've been thrown out, being perceived to be handicapped physically or mentally. You go to Jordan Hop, the Jordan House of Prayer, and you see how Christianity is on the rise in the Middle East. You go to midnight mass at the Church of Nativity on Christmas Eve, and although you're not Catholic, you are so moved by how people of different faiths, nationalities, cultures, financial status are all coming together to celebrate the birth of the Christ. And I would say being a Christian in the industry is the same as being a believer. It is both the most difficult and the most easy thing you can do. Easy because once you know the Christ, whether you're a father, a brother, a sister, an actor, a plumber, it doesn't matter. You understand there's a purpose for your life that you could step into. The hardest because there is, the second you say that and people know that about you, you're living in a goldfish bowl. They don't understand necessarily that you're just a forgiven sinner with flaws. They think because they don't know Christianity and they don't understand and walk with Christ that you're a perfect person. So everything that you do is under a magnifying glass. And then you have to start making very discerning choices between what you say yes and no to, especially when you're a father. I look back at some of the choices I've made and I'm disgusted with myself, but at least God is a loving and forgiving God where I can learn from it, not make that error again, and then still be able to speak about it. Because with the pandemic, we've learned that my daughter's 16 years old. She and her entire generation, all that pandemic and the locking down did. I'm not saying it was right or wrong. COVID almost took me. I almost passed from it. Praise God, I did not. But it exacerbated at that generation depression, anxiety, fear, stress. And, what did they turn to? Hopefully they turned to God, sometimes the Lord, through music, through art, through film. Therefore, we have to step into better choices. And I'm speaking for myself. So.
You said something that piqued my interest. Christians who go to the dumpster and rescue babies. What was that? Can you elaborate just a bit on that? What you're talking about?
I absolutely can. So when we were shooting Infidel in the Middle East, I was fascinated by going to all of the biblical, historical buildings and structures. We went and saw Petra. My daughter rode a camel in Petra. We went to Wadi Rum, incredible desert run by the Bedouins. We saw Aqaba, where you could see 4 countries from that beach. We also personally got to know a lot of the missionaries that lived there, some of who worked at a hotel. And sometimes you're taken to a certain corner of the world because the Lord is working on a certain man or woman's heart and needs you to be the vessel that helps push them over the fence, not because of you, but because of him. So I end up speaking to and getting to know some of the workers at the hotel. They shared that a suicide bomber had threatened to blow up the churches, didn't like that Christianity was on the move, but the king and his father love and protect Christians. They sent their military, they would lock arms with tank to protect those churches. We also find out from one of the workers who was a waiter and was very meek, which we know who else that describes. And he goes, I can't even talk about this, but what my parents do on a daily basis is go to a lot of the garbage dumps to rescue babies. And I said, I don't understand what that means. Do you mean aborted? I didn't know what he meant. He said, no. He said, in the Middle East, specifically here in Jordan, if a child is perceived to be mentally or physically handicapped, it is thrown away. And obviously, most of the times when the parents go out, not the children's parents, his parents, the missionaries' parents, go out to these garbage dumps, most of those babies are dead, but there are ones that are often alive. And because of being perceived of being mentally or physically handicapped, I can't speak to what the reasoning is behind that. Neither is it for me to judge. But their job is to bring those children up And ironically, we were there over Christmas, and they had these orphans that were believers that came and sang Christmas carols in the church. I have footage of it. It's one of the most touching things I've ever seen in my life. Some of them were children who had been thrown out as babies. So,
wow, that's powerful. I don't have a good.
Extraordinary.
Yeah, that reminds me of, there are stories throughout Christian history of that. I mean, some of the earliest Christians, that's what distinguished them from the non-Christians, was going and rescuing the Roman babies in the Roman Empire, at the trash heaps or wherever they threw away trash. I
did not know that, Michael.
Yeah.
Which book is that in?
It's not in. Well, I'm talking after Scripture. I'm talking about stories.
Okay.
During the Roman Empire.
Yes.
Yeah. Some of the best Christian history books discuss that, how, even the earliest Christians valued life, and that's something that distinguished them from everyone else. And that's one way they stood out. So when you were telling that story, that's what I was kind of thinking of. I thought, wow, that's been true forever. That's a really great story.
Thank you. It is. And to even add to that, a lot of these countries I've filmed in and have lived in that are third world countries, Christianity is not a hobby or something you do for fun. It's literally how you survive. And the church in this country has gotten fat and lazy because the second we're challenged on our faith, we freak out and get anxious and have paranoia. But we're to look to the example of the Lord. The Pharisees try to do the exact same thing to him. He would come back at them with wisdom and love, but he was very firm in what he said because he knew what they were trying to do. Now, granted, we're not the Lord, but we are to be strong in our faith and to realize that what we have could be taken at any moment, which is our freedom of speech and our ability to be able to communicate what is in his word. Because with every day that passes, it seems that we're more limited. And yet, I'm blessed. I go to Shepherd Church here in Los Angeles. Pastor Dudley Rutherford heads up a 10,000 member church that functions like a 100-member church, because there's ministries for everything and anything you can think of, including the younger generation. And we're lucky. We have it good as believers in this country.